welcome to another episode of BGO Blind Pig, the official podcast of bgobsession.com, home to your burgundy and gold obsession since 2009. We're out there. Obviously, if you're watching us, you found us on YouTube. If you can stand looking at our ugly mugs every week, we're out there on YouTube. We are also have an audio podcast version, pretty much on any podcast provider you want to find out there. And we're also on social media. We have a presence on X, on Instagram, on Blue Sky, and we also have a Facebook group. Just search BG Obsession, which stands for Burgundy and Gold Obsession, if you weren't aware of that, and you'll find us. But most importantly, come to our forum. Really, all the stuff we do, other than that we love talking about football on the podcast, but most of what we do on social media is just trying to let people know that we're out there. We're one of the biggest fan forums, Washington football fan forums, and have been for going on 2 decades now, but we still run into a lot of folks that don't know we're out there somehow. So come visit our forum. We have a lot of fun, great community, a lot of contests. We have a game day chat every game day. That is most of the time a joy and a hoot. Sometimes it can be a little bit of a deep pit of despair, but when we're not doing well, but at least you have plenty of company in your despair if we're not doing well. So guys, earlier this week, we made a joint decision that we really weren't in the mood to talk about that Dallas game, but it's been a couple of games. So I just wanted to give you a chance to do a quick drive-by on what were your takeaways from the Dallas game. Were you shocked? We all predicted we'd win that game, and we were obviously all wrong. We did mention about 17 times that it was an NFC East division game. So obviously we're aware that anything can happen in those games, but what'd you think? What's your quick minute on the Dallas game? Don't everybody start at once.
Quick minute on the Dallas game. It was all right. For those of you that may never have tuned in before, I actually live in the greater Dallas-Fort Worth area. I've been down here for, 30 plus years. And this week I've actually done something I've never done before, and that's to kind of hide. Because Dallas is not a football. I'll tell you what, you want to talk about a fan base that's down on their football team. The DFW area is down on their football team. And I had to go to Thanksgiving with my in-laws, who are all Cowboy fans, yesterday. And nobody, I got to tell you, I wasn't nearly as surprised by the outcome on Sunday as my in-laws were. There was no tackiness yesterday at the Thanksgiving Day table because they were all too stunned by the fact that their football team won. And won against a team that, to a person, they all felt like was better. They're all a little jealous right now of what's going on in Washington, if you really want to know the truth. We have an owner that's out of the way. We have a general manager that knows his head from a hole in the ground. And I'm being polite there. I really wanted to say something else. And they're not the same person. That's the key, right? The owner and the GM are not the same guy. And the head coach is somebody that they all would have loved to have promoted last year when he was in Dallas. They're downright jealous, even though we lost a game on Sunday. Washington lost a game on Sunday to Dallas. They can't figure out how it happened. I'll be honest and tell you, I can't figure out how it happened. I sat in my living room and cried my beer Sunday afternoon. I know I'm not the only one. Well, all right, I may be the only one that cried in his beer, but I'm not the only one that cried, Paul. Well, Paul's tears were probably of rage.
So Paul is like our BGO spirit animal because he takes things. He's the most excited when good things happen, and he's the most downtrodden when good things don't happen. So what was but you're back, Paul. You're still with us, man.
That's right. Hanging on for dear life, and you guys save me every week, I think. Am I surprised that we lost? Yes and no. Yes, from the standpoint that I personally think we have the better team. We have more to play for right now. But also not surprised because it's the Cowboys, and the Cowboys always seem to be a thorn in our side one way or the other. I haven't heard a lot of people say this, but it pains me to say this as well. But I'll give the Cowboys a little bit of credit. Those guys have absolutely nothing to play for this year, and they found that inner motivation to come into our building and find something to play for. And the fact is, those guys executed. We didn't. Um, we always talk about complementary football, but it was complementary football on our end in the worst of ways. We were equally bad at moments in that game, defensively, offensively, and obviously on special teams. And I know a lot of people are going to be hard on Austin Seibert this week. Because of what transpired in that game. But the fact is that in the NFL, things seem to even out over the course of the season. And he's won us as many games this year as he's lost us, right? Like, people are going to argue that, oh, he lost us this game this weekend, but he also saved our bacon a few times as well. So, I mean, I'm not going to pin it on him. I think this is going to be a blessing in disguise, this loss to the Cowboys. I think it was a harsh reminder to this team that we can't sleepwalk through a game for 75% of the contest and expect to win. We just don't have the talent right now to be able to do that, like maybe a Kansas City can, or a Philadelphia can, or a Detroit can. We have to be prepared, and we have to be able to execute each and every week in order to win games. And I think that it is only going to make us sharper and better down the stretch. Those are my thoughts.
How about you, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was there's like it's no excuses or anything. It was our first dud game. It's the first game I really feel like we just didn't have it. And the Cowboys tried to give us the game early on, and we just couldn't take advantage. And it just took a long time for the offense in particular to get together. But when they did, they started looking like the old offense, or the offense I was accustomed to this year. And like when Terry caught that touchdown at the end, and I said, in my mind, I was like, okay, we got this game now. We're going to tie it. We got the momentum going to overtime. We're going to win this game. But it didn't work out that way. And one thing that it reminded me of that I should always remember, and it's shown across the league, is division games are crazy, or they can be crazy. And no matter the records, you look at the Steelers, who look amazing, and then they lose to the Browns. The Texans just lost to the Titans, where we're going to play. And then even today, the almighty Chiefs, they got very lucky at the end and beat the Raiders, who suck. So when it comes to division games, there's really the general rules don't apply across the league. And so, tough loss, our first real stinker kind of a game to me, but still overall our team still scraps, even though they have all the blunders on special teams and whatnot. They don't just pack it in. They still effort all the way to the end, which is a good sign for a team like us. And then like Paul was saying, at least we're like going through the struggles, which I think will pay off down the road. Where some teams, I wouldn't be surprised, like say the Lions, they're like coasting, they're smashing everyone. What's going to happen to them, once they have like a tough game, or and at what juncture in the season will that happen? So, we'll see how it goes. But tough game. But I think we'll spring forward from that.
Well, you guys did a great job of pretty much covering all the ground. The only two things that I would add are, I do think the element of spending a whole week hearing all of sports media, not the Washington fan base, but actually all the sports mediates and prognosticators and talking heads showing Washington on the pig chart. Nobody giving Dallas any respect and just talking about how woeful they are. I don't care how bad a team you are, and even on a team where the coaching staff may well be on their way out, who knows? That still is that's going to get them really motivated. And like you said, they really had nothing to lose. But a lot of teams with nothing to lose go out there and lay an egg week after week because they're just bad teams. But I think Dallas, I think it pissed them off and they felt disrespected. And on our side of the ball, like you said, Tony, that was really the first game that we just didn't show up in, like right from the outset. And I really feel like they came in tight. I feel like they knew, they lost 2 games in a row, granted against good teams, but they still were on a two loss streak, and then playing at home and really needing that win to get back on track. I think there was a lot of pressing, and I thought the coaches were tight too. I thought just some of the decisions they made where week 3 Dan Quinn goes for it. Goes for the win. Or I'm not saying that was a bad decision to kick the extra point or whatever, but I think week 3 Dan Quinn goes for that 2-point conversion, and there were some other decisions I felt like that we looked tight, and just the fact that it literally took 3 quarters for the offense to look like our offense. So I kind of chalk it up to that, and we'll see what happens. But you'll notice a couple of things. The title of this one is It's Crunch Time. And then if you could see our background, you'd see that we've got the Superman logo, but it says JD5 on it. And I think that's an indication that we think Jaden Daniels needs to look a lot more like Superman than he has for a lot of the last few games. So before we get to, go ahead, Bob.
Well, I want to take a little bit of, I don't know. I want to argue about that just a little bit. I'm not sure Daniels didn't look like Superman this last week. I feel like our receivers are beginning to regress to the mean a little bit.
Yeah.
We all looked at the wide receiver core at the, before game 1, and we went, it's Terry McLaurin and a bunch of guys. And lo and behold, a bunch of guys caught everything that was thrown at them. Everything that was thrown at them. I mean, literally, we had like a string of 3 games there where nobody had a ball hit them in the hands that got dropped. The only quote unquote drops were balls that were uncatchable. And how many drop balls did we see in Q1 and Q2 this last week against Dallas? I'm not saying
only that. We saw somebody make a poor, I think it was Noah Brown, I'm not sure, but made a poor effort on a ball that was in his hands.
Yeah.
Dallas took it away.
Yeah.
Took it away from him. So,
for the record, I'm not saying that these were easy balls to catch, right? But there were 2 or 3 of those balls that would have made a huge difference in terms of momentum and in terms of field position and keeping drives alive. And we watched several guys drop balls. I mean, and one of the interceptions that Daniels had on Sunday wasn't even his fault. It went right through the running back's hands and into the linebacker's hands, right? I mean, so Daniels has a pair of INTs, neither of which I never count a Hail Mary INT against the quarterback. Yeah. Right. That's a throw up ball, right? And everybody knows it's a throw up ball. I wouldn't count that in the stats. So the other ball went right through somebody's hands. I feel like Daniels had a pretty solid game on Sunday, and his supporting cast didn't do enough to support it. Could he have done more? Probably. But you know what? All 11 guys on offense could have done more.
That's a fair point.
So that's kind of how I feel about it at the moment. Daniels looked more like Daniels this week than he had the last 2 or 3 weeks, where I feel like he was nursing the rib injury. This week, he didn't look like he was nursing the rib injury to me.
Yeah, he ran like his normal self too. So
yeah,
that was a good sign. And yeah, you're right about the receivers, and then especially that Bates fumble. I was like, that was such a momentum killer.
Oh, that hurt.
So I'm going to move us on from the game that shall not be mentioned anymore. And before we get to the Titans game, which we will get to very shortly, I think we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that this week was the anniversary of Sean Taylor's demise after, I guess, interrupting a robbery in his home with his girlfriend and daughter, infant daughter in the house. And we don't need to rehash what happened, but I know that was just a brutal time to be a Washington fan. And I just want to say one thing about that, and then I'll let you guys speak to it. You know, I was fortunate enough to be able to cover games for another website back in 2005 when Gibbs made his return, and that was when we started covering games. And I can remember, and that was Sean Taylor's rookie year, and I can remember how he started out, which was like basically insolent and not friendly. Wouldn't talk to any of the media guys. Forget a website guy. He wouldn't talk to John Kime. He had a chip on his shoulder, had a couple brushes with the law, even I think some gun stuff and some other stuff, off the field. And it wasn't clear that he was going to be develop into a solid citizen. I mean, you could tell he was an incredible player, but he kind of looked like a problem child that first season. And then I think I have to give Joe Gibbs a lot of credit because I think Gibbs had a huge impact on him, as Joe Gibbs has had a huge impact on like innumerable people in his life, which is why he's Joe Gibbs and a Hall of Famer. But you could see it for the next 3 seasons. I'm not saying Sean Taylor was always like high-fiving people and, inviting the media over to interview him, but you could see him grow more than any other player on that roster. Every single season, he just got more and more mature and more serious about being a professional football player. And it was just kind of really cool to see. So that's kind of my memory of Sean Taylor, is just where he was going, and I have no doubt in my mind that guy was a future Hall of Famer if that tragedy doesn't happen. But
I know a lot of people, a lot of people's memories of Sean Taylor are wrapped around like the touchdown return against Philadelphia. The dive into the end zone. My big memories of Taylor are the Green Bay game, because we lost that game, but all Favre could talk about afterwards was how guys were open and then they weren't open, because this man beast could cover ground like no one he had ever seen in the NFL. I mean, Favre was accounting for where Taylor was. He was looking Taylor off his intended receiver. And then Taylor was still making a play because he was playing this deep safety crazy thing that Greg, and I should remember Greg's last name, the defensive coordinator. What's Greg's last name, John?
Blake.
Huh?
Blake.
Yeah. No.
Oh, Greg Williams, right?
Greg Williams. Yeah. Blake was the defensive line coach at that point in time. Yeah, Greg Williams had concocted this crazy scheme with Taylor playing like deep center field, because Taylor could literally play sideline to sideline, and no one had ever seen anybody do that before. And he did it against Favre, and he had 3 interceptions that game, 2 interceptions that game, and like 3 pass defenses. I forget what the stats were, but it was just, I've never seen a safety in the NFL take over a football game. And Taylor took over a football game against arguably one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game. And it was just mind-boggling. And we were all in awe. And this was just weeks before his eventual death. I mean, the injury and then his death. I mean, it was all that same season. And the next thing is, I don't know, for the next 5, 6, 7 years. Actually, you know what? I realize it happened too long ago for the guy to still be playing football, but there are still days I sit here and watch the game, and somebody on the opposing offense makes a play, and in my mind, my little voice in the back of my mind goes, "You wouldn't have done that if Sean Taylor were still playing."
Sean Taylor's highlight reel looks like most NFL stars' career highlight reel.
Yeah,
I mean,
he only played
on
3.5
YouTube,
years.
You forget. I mean, I forget. I go out there and watch, and I'm like, oh my God, he's just so unbelievable. What an incredible player.
Yeah, it was just heartbreaking because like you said, he had turned his life around. He was getting on the up and up, and then like any man, he was just protecting his family. So that just and tugs at the heartstrings even more. And then as a player, like you guys already mentioned, he's just phenomenal. His talent was ridiculous, built like a linebacker, but like his speed was off the charts. And then all his hits were awesome. Even the cartoon hit, like the punter in the Pro Bowl game, you can't forget that. He just totally destroyed that dude. So yeah, just gone too soon, and you always think, what would happen if he was still here? And it's just a sad situation, and yeah, it's just a sad situation all around. But a great, immense talent.
Yeah, for me personally, two things stand out. Number one, when I think of Sean Taylor, he represents everything that I love about the game of football. He's fast, he's violent, he's physical. He basically represents the identity that I want my football team to embody. I always loved about him as a player. The other thing that stood out to me in regards to that whole unfortunate circumstance, if you remember the game that we played the week following his death, I believe was against Buffalo. And going into that game, everybody thought there's absolutely no way that our team is going to lose that game. Like, we're going to win that game for Sean. We ended up losing it. We dropped to 5-7 on the season. And then the team had this huge rally. We win 4 in a row, finish at 9-7, get into the playoffs. And you can tell that team was just playing out the string for him. And to me, that represented what he meant to that football team and what he meant on a personal level to some of the football players on that team as well. So I think that speaks to his character and the type of person that he was as well. The fact that those guys just went out and gave absolutely everything that they had for him. And I'll always appreciate and cherish that.
I don't know if anyone from Washington's organization like watches our podcast or hangs out on the board, but I have a great idea for a new tradition, which is every year during this week, whatever game we're playing, the entire team does the 5 yellow stripes on the socks.
Oh yeah.
And the team pays the fines for every single player. I thought that was he was definitely a rebel, man. Sean Taylor, like that's what you saw the first year in particular, was that guy was a rebel. He didn't want anyone telling him what to do, and he was his own man all the way to the end. And the NFL doesn't always appreciate that, but I thought it was kind of cool. So I'll never forget that that game where he came out with those socks. Anyway,
his face mask. That was another thing he did.
Yeah. We can do that too.
Right. So I went and looked that Green Bay game up because I was curious. He had 3 solo tackles. He had 2 interceptions for 15 return yards, 4 passes defended, and a forced fumble, all by himself, playing deep center field for this team. I just,
yeah, he was
to
that
this
guy.
day,
Man.
all I can think is what if.
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever have a player. I think he's the most talented player in Washington football history. I really do. Just in terms of sheer talent, any position.
Yeah, I'd have to agree.
I can't argue with you, John. I wish I could, but I can't.
That would be a good thread idea.
Maybe Baugh.
Maybe
Baugh,
yeah.
But none of us got to see Baugh play, so it's
Pat
tough.
Pat Fisher was a guy,
Yeah.
Who knows? But yeah, not from our era. So we got a big game this week, and there's a reason why we put "It's Crunch Time" in the title of the podcast tonight. It's definitely crunch time. We're hosting the Titans, who are 3-8, third in the AFC South. They've got, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but they have an all-rookie primary coaching staff. Brian Callahan's in his first season as head coach. Nick Holtz, their offensive coordinator. I think he was maybe a college OC with, I want to say UNLV, but it's his first year as an NFL OC. And then Denard Wilson is a first-time defensive coordinator. I doubt they're on the hot seat in their first season, but very green in terms of being in those roles. They have wins at Miami versus the Pats in overtime and at Houston last week. But they've lost to the Bears, the Jets, the Packers, the Colts, the Bills, the Lions, the Chargers, and the Vikings. So certainly some good teams in that list. And then a couple teams that aren't so good, but they're kind of a Jekyll and Hyde team. And I'll go over some of the stats, the unit stats, in a few minutes. But what are you guys' thoughts heading into what I think we all have to say is a must-win against the Titans, who early in the season we probably thought we'll handle them easily?
I'm struck by the number of connections there are. You know, Chris Harris, former defensive backs coach here at Washington, is still on the coaching staff there in Carolina, or not Carolina, in Tennessee. He's the defensive passing game coordinator. Randy Jordan, who was our running backs coach the last several years, is the running backs coach in Carolina, or in, why do I keep saying Carolina? In Tennessee now. And there's a couple other guys too. Tracy Rocker, former player here in Washington, drafted by the old Redskins, is on the staff there. He's, what is he, the defensive line coach?
Isn't there O-line coach in Callahan? Wasn't he?
Yep. Bill Callahan is the offensive line coach, and their linebacker coach is Steve Donatel, brother of Tom Donatel, our defensive backs coach. So there's a lot of common threads between the coaching staffs of the two teams. I feel for Tennessee Titans fans. It's a team that I see as something of on a similar path to the Commanders. There's not a tremendous amount of talent on this football team. I think the owners have not done well there as far as funding a solid football program, much like our former owner did not fund a solid football program here. And I kind of feel for this entire staff and the players that have gone there. But I'll tell you what, if there's one guy on this team that I'm worried about, it's Tony Pollard.
Yeah.
I was stunned as a guy living in Dallas. I was stunned that Dallas let Pollard get away last year. They have not replaced him. That's part of the problem the Cowboys have right now, is the fact that they, as much as it didn't look like it this last weekend, they do not have a running game like they had with Tony Pollard. He was a running threat. He was a threat in the passing game. The dude was arguably the second or third most important guy on the offense in Dallas, and they let him go to Tennessee, and Tennessee is using him well. And we don't do well against good running backs. And I'm a little worried about if they feed him the ball early and often, what may happen this weekend.
Yeah, it's good points, Bob.
For me personally, you were kind of alluding to it, John. You were mentioning how these guys are, in many regards, a Jekyll and Hyde team. When you look at their stats, they do have some pretty decent numbers, and you kind of scratch your head and say, why the heck are these guys, I believe, 3-8 on the season? But one thing that has stood out to me about Tennessee is they have done, I don't want to say a good job because I'm using it in the wrong sense, but they've done a really good job of beating themselves. They're last in the NFL in turnover differential, penalty yards. They're giving up over 60 yards per game in penalty yards. They're like bottom 5 or 6 teams in the league, and they're allowing their quarterback to be sacked on 11% of his dropbacks. So, I mean, this is a team that if you force them into bad situations, they will make mistakes and beat themselves. And I think that we really, really need to try and get this team into bad situations this week. Get them into those second and third and long situations where you can create and you can force these guys into the errors that they seem to be prone to do this year. Those are my thoughts.
So I know, Tony, we'll get to you in just a second, but I wanted to give a shout out to our man crush fellow podcasters, Reggie and Ken over on Burgundy and Gold Knuckleheads. And I was listening to their Titans preview earlier this week, and one of the points they made, and it speaks to what you just talked about, Paul, is that the Titans have only scored more than 20 points twice all year. So they really struggle to get into the end zone and to put points up. And I think a lot of it has to do with what you said. I already talked about the inexperience on the coaching staff, and then the penalties, and then making kind of bonehead mistakes in, crucial moments. However, they did just come off a huge win against Houston, where they made Houston look pretty human. And I think the number I heard was that Stroud was under pressure 40% of every drop back, like significant pressure. So it's not to discount them, just like, we didn't discount Dallas last week. I think we got to be careful about that. But anyway, there are some reasons where we can look at and think we should have some advantages here. What's your drive-by initial take, Tony, on the Titans coming down?
I think we had mentioned earlier, it's by the letter of the law, it's not a must win. It feels like it is. So I think we would really have to get this game. And I think their defense is good. They have good, they play pretty good, as we guys outlined. And their biggest problem to me is their quarterback. I'm not a believer in Will Levis. I think he's not very good. He has 10 turnovers, which I think is leads to their issues on offense. So while they were able to beat the Texans, you can't take them lightly, especially with their defense. I think we could take advantage of their offense, and hopefully we can garner some turnovers off of Levis and those guys. And
Levis has had 9 interceptions and 5 fumbles, 35 sacks, which is about 7 or 8 more than Jaden's had this year. And most of Jaden's have come in recent weeks. So I just wanted to run through the team stats for the Titans. So although we did that last week and didn't mean a damn thing, because I think I said that we should be able to run it right down their throat, and we couldn't do a damn thing on the ground last week. But here's the stats. The Titans offense overall is 24th in yards, 28th in points. And we talked about haven't been putting up a lot of scoring numbers. On passing downs, they're 29th for yards, 16th in touchdowns. On rushing downs, they're 12th in yards and 26th in touchdowns. So it's kind of a weird thing where they rush it, they pass it a lot better than they do rush it, but they still can't get in the end zone. And then they rush it pretty well, but again, they can't get in the end zone. So on defense, they are second in yards allowed, which is kind of, I think somebody mentioned it earlier. It's like, how can you have the second ranked defense and only win 3 games? That's kind of curious. But here's the flip side of that. They're 27th in points allowed.
Yeah.
So they don't give up a lot of yards, but they're kind of a turnstile when it comes to letting other teams score on them.
Now, what that tells me is the offense has given up the football in bad positions and
Probably,
are playing with a short field.
Yes.
Yeah.
Versus the pass, they're first. They're top in the NFL in yards given up versus the pass, 20th in touchdowns. They're 9th against the rush in yards given up and 18th in touchdowns. And then the last thing I'll run through real quick, 33.1% on third down. That compares to 42.2 for us. 42.9% on fourth down. Of course, we're at 85.7%. And then 50% in the red zone, but they've only been in the red zone 30 times. We've been there 48 times and have a 58.3% success rate. So I mean, they're kind of a mixed bag. You can see why they're when you look at the results of the games, they're kind of all over the place. They've beaten some good teams and they've lost to some bad teams and vice versa. But You can kind of see why, because they're kind of all over the map statistically.
I think there's another very important aspect that we need to pay attention to this coming weekend. Tennessee is tops in the NFL in terms of stopping teams on third down. I think they're only giving up like 31% of third downs defensively. We were a house on fire in terms of third down conversions early on in the year. I think over the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, we were pushing at like 52 or 53%. Over the last 7 games, we've dropped down to 36% on third down conversions. So something has to give this coming weekend. We either need to get our stuff together on third down, or I think it could be a very, very long day for us, because Tennessee is quite strong at defending other teams in those critical downs.
So while we're talking about Tennessee strengths, I think Bob mentioned Tony Pollard, or Paul, one of you guys mentioned Tony Pollard, and I agree. I mean, he's got 800 yards. He's also got almost 200 yards receiving. Last week he had 119 yards, averaged 5 yards a carry against the Texans. So he's definitely, and really they don't have a running back behind him. Will Levis is their second leading rusher, and Will Levis isn't exactly RG3 back there. I mean, he's he's running for his life. For him to be the second leading rusher, that's not good, because he's not really a running quarterback. At the wide receiver spot, Calvin Ridley is the main guy there. He's 41 catches for 634 yards, right at like 50% reception rate. And then the red zone guy is Nick Westbrook Aquino. He has twice as many touchdown catches as Calvin Ridley. So that's a guy to watch in the red zone. He didn't have a ton of yards, but he's pretty sure-handed, and they seem to go to him a lot in the red zone. They've got a Okonkwo. I guess I don't know how you pronounce his name. I don't watch enough Titans games to do him justice. But Okonkwo is their tight end. They don't use him a lot, although he did have a 70-yard. I'm not going to call it a 70-yard reception. He kind of rumbled to the end zone. I wouldn't even call it a run. He caught the ball and he rumbled. You know, it's one of those things where all the blocking was perfect and he rumbled 70 yards for a touchdown.
Yeah.
But that was 70 of his 263 yards on the season. So he's not exactly Zach Ertz back there.
Stumbling, bumbling.
Yes. And then they have a really excellent kicker in Nick Folk, who pretty much is almost perfect on the year. He's perfect beyond 50 and perfect on his extra points. I think he's missed maybe 2 kicks all year.
Another former Cowboy.
Yes. So that's kind of what they got on offense. The defense is the one part you got to worry a little bit about.
Yeah. Yeah, this is one of those weekends where we need to prove all of the people that are griping about Cliff Kingsbury and the second half of the season offense slump. I kind of dismiss that. If you go back and look at Kingsbury's offenses in Arizona, they almost always had significant injuries in the second half of the season. And you start losing guys like Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins, and your offense is not going to look the same. I don't care who the coordinator is. So I kind of write off that second half of the season slump, but as long as it's happening in Washington, people are going to be talking about it. This is one of those weekends where Cliff and Jaden and McLaurin and getting Robinson back is going to be huge. We need to get the offense back on track and show that same kind of efficiency that we saw 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. When we were playing really, really well on offense, as opposed to what we saw last Sunday.
Bob, did you see the clip of Kingsbury when one of the beat guys asked him about that?
Yes, I did. He got up and walked off. Oh, my
God, man.
Yeah. Yeah. And then he made a snarky comment, and then he got up and walked off.
He did not like that. And, in fact, he's basically said, I would have to know exactly what the F you're talking about.
Yeah.
to that. Like,
Yeah. And then they
I
asked
kind of
Quinn
like
about
that.
it.
I kind of like that
I was
response.
gonna say I kind of
Yeah.
respect that.
I like the pissy, snarky, fuck you, I'll show you comment. I mean, that's really what it felt like, is show up on Sunday and we'll see what you think then, is really what the impression I got out of what Cliff did. And then they asked Dan Quinn about it the next day. And Dan Quinn basically went, I don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean second half slump? I know nothing. You know, he played the whole ignorant of everything to the T. It was, and I actually thought Quinn's response was brilliant too from the head coach. He's like, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. What are you talking about? So, you know, we'll see. My guess is behind closed doors, the team is very aware. The players are probably very aware. If I were one of those guys, I'd be wanting to go out there this weekend and show somebody something to kind of defend my offensive coordinator, because Cliff has done some amazing things this year with this team.
Yes.
You know, all of the, well, I say all of, most of the things that we as fans were really, really worried about going into the season were on the offensive side of the ball. We were worried about the offensive line. I don't care about what position you're talking. I mean, with the exception of maybe Tyler Biadasz at center and left guard with Cosme, we were worried about the offensive line.
Yes.
And we were worried about everybody not named McLaurin catching the football. And in this offense has done a really good job of making all of us that were really worried about it look stupid.
By the way, man, we talked about Dallas, but we have to spend a second on that pass to McLaurin, the magical. I mean, that felt like it was one of those game turning. This is going to be the point at which we like seize control.
Exactly. And it wasn't just the perfect ball. Terry took the only possible route. I mean, if he deviates by a foot in either to the left or to the right, that he doesn't go the distance.
We've seen him get caught. We've seen him like make incredible catches and get caught. Tony said not in his head.
Yeah.
So many times.
And who was out in front of him? Was that Noah was out in front of him and made that great block to spring?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And
that was
perfect play call.
Beautiful.
Everything. Yeah.
That was one of the prettiest pass plays I have ever seen run in Washington. Had to be top 5.
Yeah, it's gonna get forgotten because of the final result, unfortunately. But that was an amazing play.
Yeah, I saw even this week Michael Parsons on his podcast or whatever. Even he said if they played like they played in the fourth quarter, Jaden Daniels is unstoppable. Mm-hmm. I feel like if it was up to him, he'd be on our team. He really loves.
I think it might be in his future, man.
Yeah, you know, that's a topic for a future pod. Unfortunately, Dallas has a couple of years that they can option the kid and franchise the kid, but he could end up playing in burgundy and gold at some point in time. That's possible.
So I just wanted to run through the Titans defense briefly. Their leading tacklers are Kenneth Murray, one of their linebackers, Harold Landry, who's one of their outside linebackers, and Armani Hooker, who's their very talented safety. They have 17 players. I'm sorry, I'm a geek because I actually counted on Pro Football Reference. They have 17 players with double-digit combined tackles. They have 7 players with more than 40 combined tackles, and that is a ton, man. That means they have one of those swarming defenses with no big deficiencies. Their sack leaders, Harold Landry has 6. Arden Key, another linebacker, has 5. And one of their defensive tackles, Jeffrey Simmons, has 4. They've only had 5 interceptions all season on the defensive side of the ball, and Armani Hooker has 3 of them. So don't throw to Hooker. That's the lesson.
Yeah, really.
So anyway, but obviously their second-ranked defense, even though we talked about how they have given up a lot of points they're still a damn good defense.
And I know our offensive line has been struggling of late. We threw a lot of praise upon them earlier in the season, but you mentioned his name, John, and he's probably the guy that worries me most this coming weekend, and that's Jeffrey Simmons in the middle of that defensive interior. I think he's one of the more underappreciated defensive tackles in the NFL. And we need guys like Biotish and Allegretti and Cosme on the interior. Those guys really, really need to set the tone and step up this weekend against what I believe to be a pretty underrated and underappreciated player in Jeffrey Simmons. He's a handful.
So Mark, our brother from Bavaria, couldn't make it this week, but I know what he would be saying in response to what Paul just said, and that is that this team, the Titans, first of all, their quarterback is not mobile. He's not very athletic. He has been sacked 35 times. He has fumbled five times as a result of those sacks. So this game screams bring the house. And he also, under pressure, sometimes makes bad decisions because he's a rookie. That's what rookies do. But this game screams bring the heat on Will Levis. And I just don't know if we can. I don't know if we have the guys to do that. So that worries me.
I think we may have more of a chance of doing that because they're not so afraid of his, accuracy to get the ball out to the right, to the right read. So I think we may do that, but in terms of bringing the house, but I feel like our Witt doesn't do that often in general, but if he ever is going to do it, I feel like Levis is the right guy to do it too.
Well, especially since even though we've beaten on him all year, I mean, I'll just say I've beaten on him most of the season. The defensive backfield for Washington, they're kind of becoming a strength of the team, man. I don't want to overstate it, but if you look at our defensive statistics, it's the running defense that's killing us.
Yeah.
It's not the passing defense. We're like top 15 in passing defense, but the rushing defense, we're towards the bottom of the league. So I guess the good news is if you're going to bring heat on Levis and hope that he makes a mistake, you probably should have some confidence that, the DBs will be able to cover. We're not going to get burned,
Yeah, we should probably mention it. Lattimore looks very iffy. He was put on the injury report today as doubtful, which probably means we will not see him tomorrow or on Sunday. So
it kind of makes sense just from a planning point of view that they would wait and give him the bye week. I mean, that's my thought.
Listening to Quinn on Monday, it felt like Lattimore was an almost decision for Dallas, and that this week looked better, but it seems like maybe they backed off of that during the practice week. So,
Well, the flip side is, I'm going to say it again, we got to win this one. So it's kind of one of those games where it's like, if you can go, you're going. But I don't know if it applies to Lattimore or not. I just don't know.
It sounds like they were hopeful, like he gave it a really good shot, and they were hopeful. But as the week went on, there was something missing, so they rather err on the side of caution for that one.
Any final thoughts, or do we want to launch into our predictions?
Oh, let's go for it.
Yeah.
All right, Paul, you want to lead us off today?
Yeah, sure. I'll lead us off. I said it over in one of our forum threads. Everybody's down on this team right now. And again, I mentioned it at the beginning of this podcast. I think that the Dallas game is going to have taught this team a hard lesson, and I think it's going to be a blessing in disguise. Believe it or not, 3 straight losses. We still have something to play for this year. We still have our playoff fate resting in our own hands. you know, we need to wipe the slate clean and decide if we want this season to be remembered as, you know, the positive start to a new era, or if we are going to remember this as just a wasted season, right? You don't want to waste a 7-2 season. I think we come out aggressive in this game. I think we pick up where we left off in that fourth quarter against Dallas offensively. I think that we come out throwing the ball, being aggressive early, and you know, using that to later establish the run later on in the game. But we're basically going to be throwing to set up the run later on in the game. I think we establish a lead early, and I think we do enough to be able to hold on against Tennessee. I don't think it's going to be easy or pretty, but give me Washington 22-19.
22-19. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Tony, what you got, man?
Yeah, I'm kind of with Paul. Although the Dallas game, the results sucked, I think in the long run it's going to pay off. And then starting with this week, whenever Tennessee's defense is good, obviously, but whenever they've come up against a good offense, they end up losing by 10. And Detroit scored 50 something, and the Bills scored like in the 30s. So I think you can score on them. I think the fourth quarter of the Dallas game showed, once the offense, gets their mojo back, they're still capable of being high octane. And having Brian Robinson back will be a big deal. Even if he doesn't have massive numbers, just his presence helps the whole offense. He gets a decent amount on first down that helps with short second down and short third down and so on. Just his presence helps to wear down the defense as the game goes on. So I think in the end, this is a game we start to get our mojo back. The offense clicks. It's going to be a tough, hard-fought game, but I think we'll end up winning 27-16. And then lastly, another good player on the defense of the Titans we hadn't mentioned is Tavondre Sweat. He's like 370, and he's just a load in the middle too. So that's another guy we got a factor in that I just thought I'd mention.
Okay. Bob, you're up, man.
Oh, I think Daniels and the offense feel like they have something to prove this week. I'm not saying we go out and hang 40 on this defense. This is a solid defense, guys. No matter the Titans' record is not reflective of how well this defense is playing. The offense is letting them down week in and week out. You go back and look at their scores, and they're giving up a lot of points late because they're tired. And I think our offense comes out this week and feels like there's something to prove. I'm not seeing a blowout, but 24-17 feels about right for this weekend. A lot of efficiency on the offense, solid drives, and the defense probably sees a couple of turnovers more than maybe we're used to seeing, simply because of the Tennessee offense. I'm not sure they found their guy yet. And as all of us know in Washington, until you find the guy under center, it's painful. It's just painful. And maybe Will Levis grows into being that guy. Maybe Mason Rudolph becomes that guy over time. I don't know. I know a lot of us wrote Sam Darnold off, and he's doing amazing things in Minnesota right now. So
Yeah,
maybe they figured out with Levis. Maybe they figured out with Darnold. Maybe it's just one of those. It all clicks 3, 4, 5 years into their career. But if Tony Pollard can't carry this team this weekend against Washington, I think I don't want to say we cruise, but I feel fairly good about the defense's ability to stymie the Tennessee offense.
All right.
So.
Thanks, Bob. So Derek sent me. Derek was not able to be with us tonight, so he did send me some thoughts. So he said what he wanted to double down on what he's been saying for weeks, and I think what he's saying here is that we put a lot of expectations on this team that maybe aren't fair, that it's more of a developmental year, and that we're kind of living on found money or whatever. But and then he also talked about how the timing of having 2 tough losses and then losing unexpectedly, I think, to most people, to Dallas, that's kind of thrown the fan base into a little bit of a panic that's not really, maybe not totally appropriate given, again, the context of where this team is. And he just said if we had lost to Philly and Pittsburgh in September and then had this loss after winning 2 in a row against Cleveland and Cincinnati, the narrative's a little different. So, yeah, I think he's right on that. Anytime you lose 3 in a row, that's a big deal. Whether it's real or imaginary, it's a big deal. But he's still pretty hopeful for the season. He thinks we beat Tennessee and that the pressure is off now that we've kind of had that three losing stretch of games and that the offense is going to rebound. He has us winning 29-23. So a lot of folks right in the same ballpark. Here are my thoughts. I mentioned that our pass defense is better than our rushing defense by a long shot right now. And so I think that argues that, especially because their best player is probably Pollard right now. So I think we should stack the box and force Will Levis to beat us with his arm. I think that's a good idea. On offense, I would attack their rushing defense, including some designed runs by Jaden. Like I would say they've got to let Jaden be Jaden a little bit more. And again, that's why our backdrop tonight is a Superman logo with JD5 in it. I think they need to give Jeremy McNichols more opportunities. I'm assuming he's healthy this week because I haven't kept up. Being Thanksgiving week, I haven't kept up with the injury list. But I think Jeremy McNichols is a really tough, hard runner. And when he's gotten opportunities, he's looked pretty good. So I would like to see him get more runs, especially. I'm not convinced Brian Robinson's Brian Robinson yet. I think he's going to struggle this season because of the injuries, but I'd like to see him get a little bit more time. I think turnovers are going to play a hand in this, and that's why I talked about getting at Levis and putting pressure on him and getting some, doing some blitzing, whatever you got to do to make him cough up the ball, whether it's an interception or whether it's a forced fumble, because I think that can make a big difference. But I do think Jaden is going to have his best game since the Chicago Bears game. And we all remember the Chicago Bears game, but he had over 300 yards in that game, rushed for another 52 yards, no interceptions. He was solid as hell. And that was really the last time he looked like a difference-making quarterback. So I'm hoping that he's going to bounce back. And again, not that he had a bad game last weekend, but I think he's due for a really good game. I have us winning it 34-21 because we have to win this one. I really feel like I think Bob said it. I don't know who said it, but somebody mentioned that if this season's going to mean anything, maybe it was you, Paul, then we got to win this one. And I think that's true. The season, in retrospect, we'll look back at the season and say they outperformed all expectations no matter what happens. But I still think this team could make playoff noise. Maybe I'm dumb. I don't know. It's possible. But I haven't given up on that. The defense is coming around. We just got to get the offense going again. If we can do that, we're going to be tough. Anybody got any closing thoughts before we wrap it up?
Closing thought, we're going to go 4-1 down the stretch. We're going to walk into Philadelphia in the first round of the playoffs, and who knows? I'm not predicting a win, but we're going to get there winning four of the last 5.
Yeah, I like that, Paul. The bye has sucked because it's so far deep into the season, unlike other teams. But then once we get to it, like if we can win against Tennessee and just get to the bye, I think we can springboard off of that and look like the team like no one wants to play down the stretch.
Yeah, I kind of want to echo what Tony said. I've been thinking a lot about the bye here recently, and I feel like maybe the NFL is missing a bet. Maybe the NFL needs to have like a bye week in the middle of the season where everybody's off. So it's totally fair for every single team. Or maybe they spread buys out over the course of 4 weekends, dead center of the season. I don't know, but we've been so late, and some teams that were so early. Philadelphia had an opportunity to right the ship very early in the season. Normally, I would say an early bye is a lousy thing, but Philadelphia played lousy for 4 weeks, and then they had a bye, and they had the opportunity to sit down and take a long, hard look at what they were doing, and they've looked like a juggernaut coming out of that ever since. And so, maybe the answer for the entirety of the NFL is to rearrange the bye and not try and spread it out so far, but condense it and have more teams off at the same time. But
I believe this is the third season in a row where we've had our bye in the last possible week. I believe that's true. I could be wrong, but
it's been late. You're right, John. It's been late. I don't know if it's been last week, but it's been late.
Yeah, it feels like it's always been late. But yeah,
how hard is it to randomize things? I mean,
I feel like the NFL's got a system that works that you work back every year. I won't be surprised if next year our bye isn't like the very first bye weekend.
Yeah, the other extreme.
Yeah, well, exactly, right? And
Yeah.
then so now we've gone to the very last weekend. Now next year we're the first weekend, and we start working our way back again, which is why I say maybe we have too many weekends with byes, and we need to condense them and push those bye weekends towards the middle of the season. I don't know. Just my thought.
I like it. Well, if you've hung in with us this long, please share our podcast so people know we're out there on YouTube. And for God's sake, subscribe. That way you won't miss any of this scintillating, incredible conversation the next time we do a podcast. Remember, we're out there on every social media outlet out there. I think we're even on TikTok, although we haven't posted in about 2 years. But you don't want us posting on TikTok, trust me, or Snapchat or whatever it is. So anyway, but most importantly, come visit us at bgobsession.com. We have one of the best, if not the best, Washington football fan forum out there. We've been around since 2009. I guarantee you, if you come visit us, you will stay. You will stick around and stay. So until next time, guys, that'll do, pigs. That'll do.